My parents skipped my wedding to attend my toxic brother's petty last-minute birthday party, and now he's dealing with the fallout because no one told him about it. A 31-year-old man got married a few days ago, but my family didn't go. My brother Gerald wasn't even invited because we don't get along, so that wasn't shocking. But even my parents didn't show up because Gerald decided to throw an elaborate 28th birthday party the night before my wedding, and he sent out invitations to all of our relatives about it. He had rented out a large venue and gone all out on entertainment by hiring a live band and a stand-up comedian to perform. I'm only assuming that the catering and drink arrangements would have been on par with the entertainment. Though they're not exactly nationally popular, they're still fairly popular in the local circuit. In addition, I'm assuming that everything would have been pretty expensive because, just to be spiteful, he hadn't been invited, and it was a big deal. For a few minutes, I was genuinely worried that people might choose to attend his party rather than our wedding, but even if they did, there wasn't much we could do about it. My wife and I both knew that people would have to choose between attending the party the night before and our wedding the following day because the party was being held in the city and we were getting married in a hotel that was nearly 8 hours away. In hindsight, it seems unreasonable that we were even concerned in the first place because, of course, a wedding is far more important than a birthday. The only people who did not attend were my parents, which was quite unexpected because, although we had a few days before our wedding, I didn't expect them to attend his party and not bother showing up for the wedding. We wanted to let people make their own decisions, and we are very fortunate that everyone chose to attend. The disagreement happened on a call 4 days before the wedding, and I was so busy with last-minute preparations that I was unable to reach them. They didn't bother either, but I never imagined that they would skip it because weddings are significant milestones in people's lives, especially when it involves your child. The argument also involved the wedding and the birthday because I called my parents after my cousin showed me the invitation to let them know what was happening, and I assumed that they would be on my side and that they were going to explain things to my brother and get him to back off. Instead, they began blaming me for not inviting him to the wedding and ignoring our previous disagreements, so now he had every right to react the way he did. I couldn't expect them to step in and try to defuse the situation because we're no longer children, and they didn't think it would be appropriate. I must admit that I became a little upset with my parents because they were attempting to defend what my brother was doing, even though it was extremely petty, so I expressed my frustration. We then had a small argument, and I ended the call by telling them that if they truly believed he was doing the right thing by creating tension for us, they should just go to his party and not bother attending the wedding. I didn't speak to them again until the morning of the wedding. When we were driving to the hotel, I kept attempting to call them because they were meant to accompany us, but the car that we had sent to them had returned empty, and the driver informed us that he had been attempting to ring the bell and call our parents, but no one answered. I tried to reach them all day, but no one answered, and at night, I had to acknowledge that perhaps they wouldn't be able to make it the following day. Even in the morning before the ceremony, I kept expecting them to arrive, but they didn't, and I had to get married without them. I would have been upset about it, but I was marrying the love of my life, so I didn't allow these things to bother me at the time. After the ceremony, I decided that I wouldn't bother calling them anymore because they had already missed the most important milestone in my life. Later that evening during the reception, they called me back, and I answered out of curiosity because I was eager to hear their words. When I answered, they informed me that they had done just that because I had asked them not to bother attending the wedding, but they still wanted to congratulate me. I assumed they were discussing the wedding, but they informed me that they were congratulating me on getting my way as well as the wedding. It was evident to me that no family members had bothered to attend the party, and my parents were with me. They made it apparent over the phone that they thought I must have said something to turn everyone against my brother because, in addition to skipping the party, they also shamed and lectured him for his actions. Through calls and text, Gerald's friends and co-workers attended the party, but it was a huge waste because he had thought that many people would show up, but in fact, only a small number did. Gerald is now not only disappointed with the rest of the family, but he has also wasted a lot of his money. And somehow, this is my fault because my parents honestly thought that I had said something to make the rest of the family turn against him. While I was on the phone with them, I excused myself from the reception and went out to speak with them about the situation. I told them that I was very hurt that they had chosen to skip my wedding because of something so minor, and that they were even making fun of me for getting what I wanted right now, even though the rest of the family had made their own decision. While I was with them, I got into a heated argument with them, and they told me that they couldn't care less about what I thought because they knew that I was jealous and insecure about my brother, and that's why I was acting this way. That was the last straw, and I didn't want them to ruin the best day of my life, so I just hung up and blocked them. Now that the wedding has been over for a few days, I finally decided to release a statement about what had happened because many people had asked why my parents had decided not to attend. I decided to send out a letter to all of the guests explaining everything in detail because they couldn't even believe that they had chosen to attend Gerald's party. I told them about the party my brother had thrown, the argument my parents had with me, and what I had told them about not bothering to attend the wedding. I also talked to them about the argument we had over the phone during the reception. In other words, I wrote everything out and didn't leave any details out, and now everyone is cutting me off and on. They're accusing me of being petty and going out of my way to cause drama with my family, which may be the case. So alright, for going into detail about why my parents didn't attend my wedding and turning the rest of the family against them, fine. Many of you had a lot of questions about why my brother and I don't get along. There isn't a specific reason. Even as kids, we weren't that close, but as we grew older, we began to become even more distant. He seemed to be a little envious of me, constantly copying me and other things, which used to irritate me. As a result, we began arguing by the time we were in high school. After I left for college and then returned for work, I would occasionally go home, but even then, he would be completely annoying, making fun of my appearance, my income, and other things. There really wasn't any specific incident that led us to act in this way. Rather, it was just situations that went sour over the years, which is why we don't get along. I chose to ignore him completely because I knew that I would have to see him, and it didn't seem worth it to respond to him and start arguments. After a while, he realized that I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of reacting to him, so we just stopped speaking to one another. And even when we would see each other at family get-togethers, we would just ignore each other, not inviting him to the wedding. I don't think I did anything wrong. I don't even think he expected to be invited, and if he had, that would have been a pretty unreasonable expectation. My parents, on the other hand, know exactly why I stopped talking to him. They tried to make amends at first, but it didn't work, so they gave up on it too. However, as far as I can recall, they had never been more supportive of him or me, us, which is actually why I was even more shocked by their recent response, because it seemed like they were acting unfairly against me, which had never happened before. Anyway, it is what it is, and I can't change it. Let's start by saying thank you to everyone who left a comment. It was comforting to know that I'm not at fault and that I have nothing to apologize for. Regarding the numerous emails from my parents that have been inundating my inbox ever since I told the other members of the family, I've deleted them and I've blocked them everywhere, so they can't continue attempting to create new accounts and contact me. But I won't retract what I said about them. And it's not like I made anything up and started saying exaggerated or false things about them. I simply stated the facts in the email I sent to the entire family, without including any personal opinions. People were then free to decide for themselves what they wanted to do. They had already accused me of trying to turn the rest of the family against Gerald on the day of the wedding, so I only did what they had accused me of, because I didn't commit that act. At least what I did was much more transparent than what they are currently attempting to do. My cousins and a few other relatives had shown me the email that they sent out in response to their behavior, so that's not my problem. In response to my statement that I've always been insecure and jealous of Gerald, they made up an incident that never happened, claiming that even though my brother had thrown a last-minute birthday party, it was only because I had gone out of my way to make him feel excluded and that he had retaliated. It seems that a few weeks after I had sent out the invitations to the rest of the family, I called Gerald up to make fun of the fact that I was inviting the rest of the family, but not in him because he was just not fit to attend. The rest of the family hasn't been buying anything they've been saying about me, so I haven't bothered to clarify anything because I know they're not telling the truth, and no one will believe them. However, they also claimed that I had told Gerald that my in-laws come from a fairly well-to-do family, and I didn't want them to know that my brother was a freelancer who worked for very little. Now, I hadn't done anything of the sort, and anyone who knows me well will not believe anything of this kind. It's pretty ironic that they have to resort to fabrication to paint me as the villain to salvage their image and reputation, and in doing so, they're not even helping themselves. In fact, they're making things worse for themselves. I honestly don't understand why they are so determined to portray me negatively at this time, especially since I don't even believe that I've done anything wrong apart from sending that email. It doesn't make sense to me, but it's obvious that they're desperate and grasping at straws. It's been a week since my last update, and last night, Gerald and my parents decided to add me to a conference call. They were both calling from temporary numbers, so I don't have those. But for me, this is a chapter that's done and dusted, and I'm just going to focus on my time as a newlewed because that won't come back. I can deal with the drama later. I'm fairly certain that this is not going to be the end of this situation, and they will do everything in their power to drag it out like chewing gum. Update 2. Numbers saved, but it doesn't take much to figure out that it must have been them. I was at home with my wife, So I decided to answer the phone and talk to them because I wanted to play a practical joke on them. As soon as I answered, I pretended that I couldn't hear them for about 5 minutes. Even though they had called me to yell at me, they had to make sure they were at least audible, so before they said anything, they had to coordinate with me, which was hilarious. I asked them what they wanted me to do, even though I didn't intend to agree to it. I chose to play along for laughs, but they thought I was being sincere, so they told me that a lot of things had been said by all of us, and at the same time they told me that the rest of the family was not on speaking terms with them. Everyone was very upset about their behavior, and they thought that my parents and Gerald were extremely petty. In the end, the only thing it was hurting was the reputation of our entire family. I found it odd that they were saying that because, in my opinion, the entire incident had not damaged my reputation or image. People still like me. However, I suppose they were just trying to make me feel as though this had anything to do with me or my image, so that I would at least be somewhat receptive to whatever they were asking of me. In any case, they informed me that they wanted to send out another statement via email stating that we had decided to. They claimed that since we are still family, the only way we could repair our reputation at this time would be to work things out among ourselves and forgive one another. They did this because they didn't want the rest of the family to find us the target of gossip about this incident, but I could see right through them and knew that they were only willing to act as though we had forgiven one another because they knew that no one had fallen for any of the false stories they had been spreading about me. They wanted to avoid being excluded by the rest of the family, so they had to act as though we were on good terms again and that I had forgiven them. I was tired of playing around by that point, so I firmly refused and told them that they were the ones who wanted to repair their reputation, not me, so I really had no reason to comply and act as though I had forgiven them. I'd also had a major issue with the way they had phrased everything, that we had forgiven each other, because I don't think that they are entitled to forgive me because I haven't done anything wrong. I may have said a few things in a heated moment, but ultimately they chose to skip my wedding and attend the birthday party, so whatever has happened since then is due to their actions. In addition, after all the stories they've been spreading about me, I don't want to appear weak and act as though I've forgiven them, so I made it very clear to them that I didn't agree with anything they suggested, and if they wanted to keep being upset with me and keep spreading lies about me in the hopes that maybe someone would believe them and they could explain everything, they were free to do so. Naturally, this made my parents and Gerald furious, and he told me that I was to blame for everything. He said that if I had just been considerate and not invited him to such a significant family event, then none of it would have happened. It was obvious that he felt ignored, and for a brief moment I felt bad, but then it was my fault. I told Gerald that I'm not required to invite everyone, especially when I don't even get along with them, and they know it. We had a little argument over the phone, and he called me unreasonable. I told him that he was unrealistic to even expect that I would be inviting him, especially since we had hardly spoken for the past few years, aside from family gatherings. If he wanted me to be kind to him, perhaps he should have acted similarly toward me. But as far as I can recall, he has never invited me to any. Although none of the events he has hosted have ever been as important as a wedding or even an engagement, that is irrelevant. The point is that he is never kind to me, so I don't understand why he expected to be invited to the wedding anyway. After a while, things just got too loud and overwhelming, with Gerald shouting and my parents yelling about something else, and I couldn't understand them, so I hung up on them and blocked those burner phone numbers as well. I wouldn't say I completely regret it, but I did have some regrets. It was enjoyable with them, but I must admit that even while this was initially entertaining, it became rather exhausting by the end. I finished update 3, so it's been a few days since my last update, which was this morning at around 4:00 a.m. When my phone began to ring, I looked to see that it was an unknown number, so I decided not to answer since I was quite certain it was Gerald or one of my parents calling again. Once more, it was 4:00 a.m. and they were calling. Therefore, I had no intention of getting into a conversation with them at that time, especially since I had to leave for work in a few hours. However, approximately 30 minutes after I failed to answer the phone, we began to hear shouts coming from outside our house and someone ringing the doorbell nonstop while also hammering on the door. Needless to say, it was extremely concerning, and it took a few minutes to process what was happening. But before long, my wife and I realized that it was my parents and Gerald outside, and we could hear their voices. They demanded that we open up, and that they speak to us because what I was doing was ruining their lives because they had been cut off from the rest of the family, and it was all my fault. If it had been any other time of day, I might have been a little irritated, But now that it was 4 in the morning, I was furious because they truly cannot disturb people like this, and they were being pretty loud, so I was certain that the neighbors could hear them too. However, they remained silent and were kind enough to act as though nothing had happened. I knew that the noise outside had upset them, and it was embarrassing for me. But I didn't even think twice when I heard them outside. I had had enough of waiting for the police to arrive, so my wife and I just sat in bed and let them be. When the police arrived, we didn't even get out of bed, because we were both so upset about whatever was going on. We then explained the situation and had them removed from our property, but by that time, we had already lost a lot of sleep and had to skip work. It's frustrating that we missed a whole day of work because of them and their behavior, because I honestly don't understand why they had to get so upset about people not talking to them at such a time. But we have had enough, and if anything happens after this, I believe we'll need to file for a restraining order. Since moving or changing numbers is a big deal, which could be costly or time-consuming at the very least, that's not going to be feasible right now, but that's the least we can do. They haven't exactly threatened us, so I'm not sure if we have grounds for it or not. We're going to speak with a lawyer, though, so let's see how it plays out. Update 4. Okay, so it's been a few days since that incident that occurred. We spoke with a lawyer that same evening because my parents and Gerald were simply trespassing and making a scene, but they hadn't hurt anyone or anything. They were only given a warning against disorderly conduct, and no charges were brought against them. Fortunately for us, however, we still have grounds for a restraining order because of their behavior, so we decided to proceed with it today. They were served with a notice, and in a few days, we're going to appear in court and put an end to this, which will be a huge relief. Shockingly, they're acting this way, especially considering that before, they hadn't even cared about the rest of the family. Indeed, my parents weren't the type of people who were very close to the rest of the family, and Gerald hardly ever speaks to anyone in the family, so having people cut them off shouldn't have affected them as much as it has, I suppose. I've already talked to several people in my family about this, and I don't see the point in hiding their behavior any longer. I hope they're at peace now because the only people they've ended up creating issues for are themselves, and they're going to have to face the consequences of their actions. Sadly, so much drama could have been avoided if my parents and my brother had just behaved like normal, reasonable people, but they had to go out of their way to embarrass themselves, and consequently, me as well. This isn't about the family cutting them off at all, only that they wanted to cause trouble for me. This is just disappointing. Update number 5. It's been 4 weeks since my last update, and the 2-year restraining order against my family was recently granted, so that's pretty nice. The rest of the family is also in solidarity with us, which they have always been, right from the start. It's not like I'm enjoying the process. It's pretty sad that I'm going to have to file a restraining order against my family, but this situation calls for it, and I have no other choice. However, as of right now, they have not only stopped inviting them to events and completely cut them out of their lives, but they have also begun to stay in touch with me to check up on me and make sure I'm doing okay. Although I generally feel fine, there are times when I feel like the things that happened with my family are sorrowful, and I sincerely appreciate that the rest of the family is making an effort to make up for it. I don't think that there's anything in the world more comforting than the love and support of people who genuinely care. I am extremely grateful for everything that everyone has done for me, and I feel especially close to everyone, especially my cousins, who have been at the forefront of everything, helping me out emotionally and even with practical matters like connecting me with a good lawyer. I believe it is time for me to start a new chapter in my life, as my wife and I are leaving for our honeymoon in a few days, and when we return, I hope that everything has settled. In any case, I'm grateful to everyone who kept themselves updated on my situation and for all of the support. I know that a change of scenery is precisely what we need, so I'm pretty excited about this. The next week and a half will be fantastic, and I'm just going to ignore everything that has to do with my parents or Gerald.